Welcome to the Immigrant Entrepreneurs Show, where our mission is to inspire, impact, and influence other immigrant entrepreneurs to follow their dreams and create the future they want. My guest today is all the way from United States, Jennie Milton. Jennie, welcome to the show.
Hi, Ali. Thank you so much for having me on your podcast today. I'm excited to chat with you.
It's a pleasure having you on, Jennie. For people that haven't figured it out, you don't have a American accent. So tell us where you're from and a little bit about yourself, please.
Sure. Well, I'm from down under. I was born in Australia. I was born in the capital city of Canberra, and my mum and dad were entrepreneurs. They had their own ski shop. And you might be thinking, skiing in Australia? Yes, we do have snow in Australia from June until October every year. So the opposite season to the Northern Hemisphere. But I grew up skiing in the winter, and then in the summertime, my mum and dad's sports store would have all different types of sports, skateboards and rollerblades and windsurfers. And I was so grateful to grow up with my brother, having the opportunity to get into doing all of these sports. And my love of skiing was what originally made me want to go to the USA. They had really big mountains covered in deep snow, and I wanted to expand my skiing into the big mountains. And that was how I first went to the United States.
That's amazing. And obviously, your nickname is Adrenagen. And by listening to you just for a few minutes before we hit record, I can tell you have a lot of high energy. So, yeah, tell us more about that. How you got into the whole thing? Was it like that? Were you born with so much energy?
Well, thank you. Yes, I am like the Energizer Bunny, and I don't even have coffee for breakfast. I just wake up like this every day, excited about life and about what activities and things I'm going to do every day. But as you mentioned, my nickname is Adrenagen, and I was given that name because my parents had the sports store, like I told you about. And then when I got to about 18 or 19, I wanted to have my own retail outlet with all of the adrenaline based sports in it. You know, my parents had the ski shop, and at that time, snowboards were becoming popular, and the snowboarders and the skiers didn't get along. So we decided we should have a separate sort of younger person store, and I called it Adrenaline Sports. And so as the owner manager of Adrenaline Sports, I got the nickname Adrenagen, Adrenaline Jennie. And it was my job to go to trade shows and find the latest sports that people were getting into. And of course, I would try these sports myself and then decide what products I was going to sell in the store in order to, support my local market of extreme athletes and people wanting some exciting sports and fun things to do.
Wow. So tell us how you got to the US. Was it just like you decided one day I'm going to go to the US and I'm going to spend the next few years there, or what was it like?
Well, what happened was I remember this moment so clearly because it was definitely a defining moment in my life. I was in Adrenaline Sports, and I had some staff members standing next to me. They were all young skateboarders and young guys. I was the only female in our team, and we had a big TV screen, and we were playing the latest snowboard movies on that screen. And I remember so clearly seeing these people snowboarding down these majestic white mountains in Alaska. And I said out loud, maybe it was just an idea, but I said out loud, I'm going to do that one day. And all the boys next to me kind of giggled and went, yeah, right, Jen, sure. You know, this was a big dream, but I love a challenge, and they kind of set the challenge for me. And so I started putting the process in place of going on a business trip to the US and going to a trade show in order to check out new products. And also after that trade show, I was going to go up to Alaska and go heli boarding and make that
Wow.
dream come true.
Wow. So what happened after that?
So I did. I made this happen. I went up to Alaska with a group of ski industry people, and we got to go up in a helicopter. Now, I was the only snowboarder in the group and also the only female. So I was already used to hanging with the boys, but they decided that they didn't want a snowboarder in their group. And so
Mhm.
I got put with a group of people I didn't know. And that ended up being one of the best things ever because I was able to make new friends. And we went up in the helicopter and we landed on top of this mountain. And I remember standing at the top and the helicopter flies off, going, oh my gosh, be careful what you wish for because it might just happen. And all of a sudden,
Right.
I'm standing on this mountain and feeling the fear of
Mm.
a big steep mountain in front of me, the fear of being in avalanche terrain. And I had to make that decision to overcome the fear and find the courage that I needed to drop in on this big mountain. And I remember how much courage it took in order to push myself over the edge and to dive into this dream that I had wanted to make happen. And I remember doing a few turns, and the snow was the deepest snow I'd ever been in. We don't get deep snow like that in Australia. And
Mhm.
I ended up going over the handlebars, they call it, and tumbling. And then I landed back on my feet for some reason, and I kept going. And it was just like, wow, this was
Wow.
so exciting. And I got to the
Wow.
bottom and I just burst into tears. The emotion
Mm.
that was flowing out of me was just overwhelming, and it was a combination of fear and courage and a huge amount of adrenaline. So I really was
Mm.
adrenagen that day for sure.
Wow. Wow. That's amazing. So, I just lost track for a little bit because it brings, as I was listening to you, it brings a memory back to me. And my wife's cousin, God bless his soul, he used to be a snowboarder, and he was doing all the things that you can imagine. And that was his passion and that was his life. He was surfing and he was snowboarding. And unfortunately, he lost his life a few years ago. And as I was listening to you, I couldn't control it. It just brought memories back to me. And yeah, so coming back to your story, sorry, I just went off track for a little bit, but I couldn't. Things come up sometimes, and we cannot always control what's coming up.
Yeah. Yeah,
So,
it
so
brings the reality of the danger of what I was doing that day, and the people that
mhm,
do these sports. There is a real danger there. It's not just a mental fear, but it's a real physical fear as well.
right, right. But how do you keep pushing through? I always admire people like yourself that, I mean, is there no fear, or is there fear? You just don't give so much attention and energy to it. What was it? What is it like?
It is something that both my brother and I have discussed many times. My brother's actually an Olympic athlete, and he holds
Mm,
the world speed skiing record for a person with a disability and the Australian speed skiing record. So he likes going very, very fast down mountains, and he also experiences that fear like I do. And we've discussed this, and it really comes down to practice and increasing your fear
mm,
tolerance. So the first time I did it, the fear was overwhelming, that I was, very emotional. But the more that you do it and the more that you overcome that fear, I believe that your fear tolerance increases. So it's not that you're fearless, because people who are fearless tend to make mistakes, and
mhm,
they don't survive. It's important for us to have a certain amount of fear in order for to keep ourselves safe, because that fear is our natural body's reaction to a danger. So there is
mhm,
a real physical danger there, and so it's really important to respect that fear and listen to that fear. In skiing and snowboarding, we call them red flags. You're looking for red
mhm,
flags, which are dangers, and are we able to deal with that danger, or if you have 3 red flags, that's too many, and it's not the day to actually ski that mountain. But I believe that in anything in life, whether it's skiing big mountains or even the fear of public speaking or going live on your social media, everybody feels those fears, and at first they're very strong, but then with practice you kind of your tolerance builds up, and we can handle more fear than we could in the past because we've been practicing that. I like to call it my courage cocktail, and we need to have a combination of fear to keep us safe, and then adrenaline, which gives us that excitement and makes us want to overcome that fear. And adrenaline is not just something that makes us do extreme sports that are dangerous. Adrenaline, again, is a natural reaction in our body that is going to make us make a smart decision when we are doing
Mhm.
something that's potentially dangerous. So I hope that
And
helps
I
some of you.
absolutely, and I believe there is a lot of analogy in, getting doing extreme sports, going sometimes out of your comfort zone. It has a lot of analogy also with entrepreneurship, right? Because in entrepreneurship you're basically doing the same thing. You're always going to unknown places. You're always risking also a lot of things depending on your tolerance level for risk. So for me, it's there is so much that comes with either you're doing sports or other things that you're going into the zone of risk. It's the same thing in entrepreneurship. So what's your take on that?
I love talking about getting outside your comfort zone. And that's something we hear a lot, even in our business training. We
Mm-hmm.
need to get outside our comfort zone. And I like to bring that back to something that we all like to find comfort in, and that's temperature. And I think in this
Mm-hmm.
day and age, with our modern facilities, we keep ourselves in a very narrow temperature range. If we get cold, we turn on a heater. If we get hot, we turn on an air conditioner, and we keep ourselves in this very narrow range. Whereas if we can start exposing ourselves to hotter temperatures, like I do when I go home to Australia, and I start exposing myself to colder temperatures when I'm in Alaska, my comfort zone actually increases, and I'm comfortable in a wider temperature range. Now, using that analogy, that works the same whether it's an extreme sport, taking risks, or whether it's building a business. At first, when we start our business, we're in this very small comfort zone, and we need to start going outside our comfort zone. But the more that we practice that, our comfort zone increases, and then we feel more
Mm-hmm.
comfortable in some of those scary situations that we didn't feel comfortable before. So again, it's
Mm-hmm.
like learning a new sport. Practice, practice, practice.
Wow, I love that. It's also, I believe it's also your tolerance for pain, because when you get, so I do ice bath. I haven't done since a few weeks. But usually when you go into the cold water, it's like you feel pain. There is pain,
Yeah.
regardless of how often you do it, how long you do it, there is pain. And the longer you understand and you realize, hey, I'm not gonna die. I stay with the cold. I just stay with there. I have to focus on my breathing. I have to focus on my, maybe controlling and directing my thoughts. Then you realize, okay, I'm not gonna die. So the longer you become one with that feeling and you understand to accept it, the more you realize, okay, how powerful are we actually as human beings, and how much more are we capable to deal with than we usually think.
We so are, and I love you talking about the ice baths, because that's something that I'm training myself to do right now. Is next year in 2025, I am crossing Greenland from the south to the north with a group of women, and we have to
Wow.
camp in tents for about 45
Mhm.
days out on the
Oh,
ice.
wow.
And so, in order to train for that mission, I am doing a lot of cold weather camping. And in
Mhm.
Idaho, earlier this year, I camped out for 4 nights, and it was minus 30. degrees, which is the coldest temperatures that I have certainly experienced. And sleeping out in the cold in a tent without having a heater to turn on was definitely going outside my comfort zone. And I embraced that challenge and realized that there's going to be systems that I haven't learnt yet that I need to learn in order to handle those cold temperatures. So again, when you're wanting to go outside your comfort zone, you need to learn from other people. Learning the hard way and making the mistakes and being freezing cold and getting frostbite was not the direction I wanted to go. And I knew that there were many people out there that cold weather camp, that cross Antarctica and cross Greenland. And so I started contacting these people and asking them questions and finding out what systems worked best for them. So then I could model what they had already figured out themselves and see if those systems worked for me. It was important to get all the right gear, and that gear can be expensive, and sometimes the gear that worked for them may not be right for you. And so being flexible to, buy some secondhand stuff that and see if that works, and if that's great for your system, awesome, you can keep that. And then just figuring out all of those things you need. So definitely, whether it's business, sport, a new challenge, getting outside our comfort zone is important, but we can also feel more comfortable outside our comfort zone by learning from others who have already been there and might have some systems in place that have helped them before.
Very interesting. So Jennie, if somebody is listening to our conversation so far and they don't know about you, then they don't know what the podcast usually is about. They're like, okay, she does extreme sports. She's out in the cold and in the heat and does things. But obviously, this show is about immigrant entrepreneurs, and that's the main reason you're here. So obviously, you're also an entrepreneur and business owner. Please tell us what you do and how everything that you just talked about the last 15 minutes relates to your businesses and what you do for a living.
Okay, so as I mentioned, I went up to Alaska for this dream snowboarding trip, and I found out that it's not beautiful blue sky and powder snow every day. We get these storms coming in, and when the storms come in, the helicopters can't fly. And so I met one of the heli ski guides, and we were chatting, and we had something in common, and that was a love of sailing. We'd both done some windsurfing as kids, and I actually had a kite with me in my bag because on my way back to Australia, I was going to stop in Hawaii and get some lessons and learn how to kiteboard, to kite surf. And so I had this kite with me, and he had a kite as well. And so we discussed, how about we take those kites outside and see if they work with our snowboards on. And so we went out there in the windy and snowy weather, and we put up these kites, and we started getting towed around with our snowboards on. Now, there were quite a few crashes, and I made quite a few mistakes because I hadn't had those lessons in Maui yet. But that day, both of us realized the potential of using a kite on snow. And we both fell in love with a sport that's called snow kiting. And we also fell in love with each other that day, and we started dating, and I came back to Alaska a year later, and we had a few more dates, and that man is Steve, and he's now my husband of 16 years. So that day was very special for me. Not just falling in love with Steve, but falling in love with a new sport. It felt like we were creating a new sport. And it was a combination of my favorite sports of snowboarding and skiing and sailing. It's pretty much sailing on snow. And so people saw us doing this, and the owner of the heli ski operation said, oh, well, there's all these people sitting around doing nothing on these down days when it's stormy. Can you teach them how to do it too? And so Steve and I started using these trainer kites and helping other people learn to do it. And they got a huge thrill and got some rides being towed with their skis and snowboard on. And that was really the start of my business. I went
Mm.
back to Australia and got my certification as a kiteboarding instructor. I learned to kiteboard on water, and every year I was going back to Alaska to be with this man I loved as we were in our years of doing the long distance relationship thing. And I was starting to help people learn this new sport. And so that became the basis of my whole business. I ended up calling it Adrenagen. So I signed up and got Adrenagen LLC, and that became my business of helping others to learn to fly kites on snow and on water. At this stage, we were also going through the process of getting my green card. I got married in Alaska. I applied for my green cards, and I started all this process of getting business licenses in multiple states because we were only in Alaska for 3 months. And then I discovered this man I loved lived in a place called Montana, which I'd never heard of before, where cowboys come from. And so we were in Montana for a few months. And then he loved to go out to the Oregon coast and windsurf, and of course the windsurfing morphed into kite surfing out on the Oregon coast. And then I'd go back to Australia for a few months to visit my family and my parents, and all of a sudden I found myself in this nomad lifestyle of multiple states, multiple countries, trying to figure out how to run a business. It wasn't the business model that my parents had taught me of having a retail outlet in one town and servicing our local market. It really had to become a national in terms of the USA, but then international business. And so I was running snow kite schools in Alaska, Montana, Idaho, and then back home in Australia also. And then when I was on the Oregon coast, I started teaching people to overcome their fear kite surfing in the waves. Some of the lessons that we teach are not just about the sport, but they're definitely about the mindset of overcoming those fears and finding your comfort in the uncomfortable waves that are crashing all the time as well. But my real passion was teaching women. If we had to find out who is our niche, who is the person we really want to share our knowledge and our passion with, it was other women. I was hanging out with so many boys, and I discovered there were all these women that also wanted to learn. And one of the ways I built my skills in terms of my kiting journey was I was attending these women's clinics in Australia where a bunch of women got together, and we were all scared at the beginning and we all overcame our fears together, and you felt like you weren't on your own and you didn't have these men in the class with you who, you know, had their egos and they seemed to have no fear. They were happy to learn the hard way, whereas women are not happy to learn the hard way. So I developed the skills in my teaching and coaching curriculum to come up with a formula for teaching women. And I've been running women's specific clinics all over the world now for about 10 or 12 years, and those clinics sell out, and I employ other empowering women kite coaches to come and help out, and we do inspirational speeches at night, and we watch movies, and we hang out, and we put on music, and we dance, and this has become a great formula for helping other women and even young girls get into this sport.
So when you say clinics, can you explain that to me? I don't think I'm getting it.
Clinic is probably an Australian word. I have this
Right.
problem very often in the United States where I'm talking Australian and nobody understands me. I don't know if you have that problem too, but quite often we need to change our words in order to match the words. So I think they call them an event or a camp.
Got
We
you.
call them a
Okay.
clinic. It's where, we come
Okay.
together for maybe 3 days normally, and we'll all stay, in some accommodation together. I found some great hotels, especially during the pandemic. We all had individual hotel rooms rather than being in a group house. And we spend 3 days immersing ourselves in this amazing, empowering female energy and learning how to overcome our fear of wind and wind power.
Gotcha. Okay, so it's kind of a retreat.
Yes,
Let's
that
call
would
it a
be another
retreat.
word, retreat. Yes,
Yeah,
good one.
gotcha. Okay, gotcha. So where do these women, when they come, what is the outcome they seek? Is it they want to learn how to windsurf or how to kite surf? What is it? Why do they come to you? Or why do they attend these events?
They come to me because I'm offering a very unique service, which is a women's specific coaching retreat.
Mhm.
And they come in order to improve their sports. Many of them have already maybe had one or two lessons and really gotten scared. They've been in those first few stages and it's been a very scary experience, the first few lessons. Some of them have a husband or a boyfriend who does the sport, who's much better than they
Mm,
are. And they want to catch up. They want to get to a standard where they can do their sport together with their partner. And so they're wanting to improve. But most women know that we learn very differently to men. And the opportunity of going to a women's only retreat is a great thing. Now they come to learn a sport and to overcome their fear, but what I've found is that they leave with so much more, because the lessons that we teach in overcoming our fears and finding courage and getting outside our comfort zone and maybe turning something that you saw as a scary experience before, like I'm going to use kite surfing as an example. You know, the
mhm,
waves are pounding and we're scared and they're so powerful and it can be very intimidating situations. You know, I tell them to look at the white water like marshmallow, and we're going to go out there
mm,
and we're going to slash on the marshmallow. And so
mm,
learning how to turn a fear or something you're scared of into something that we can handle is something
mm,
that I do all the time. And so the feedback that I've gotten from these women that come to my retreats is that how the lessons they learnt while learning to fly a kite on water or snow are lessons they've taken into their
mm,
lives and their businesses as
mm,
well. So that's where all of a sudden my sports coaching turned into some mindset coaching as well. And I love getting those reviews back from these women telling me how they feel so empowered in many
mm.
areas of their life, not just their sport.
That's very powerful. Do you do these retreats all over the nation?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do. I love doing them up in Alaska, and the women
Wow.
up there are badass. You know, they live in cold weather, and some of them live in you know, without running water in the wintertime, and they
Wow.
don't necessarily get a lot of the opportunities that people do down in the lower 48, as they call it,
Mhm,
in order to get this training. So I do a women's clinic in Alaska every year. I love doing them in Idaho as well. That is a great spot where we get consistent snow and consistent wind. That's one of the difficulties when I'm planning a retreat, is that is my friend the wind going to come and play with us, because it's very
mhm,
weather dependent. And so
mhm,
we also have a lot of theory classes that we do, and there's other parts uh, of, you know, mindset coaching, theory coaching, learning about wind and weather and forecasting the weather that we do in classroom settings. But Idaho has a really consistent location in Island Park that gives us, you know, a lot of windy days, a lot of cold
mm,
snow days as well. I do my
mm,
kite surfing camps on the Oregon coast as well, and then I also go back to Australia and teach women's clinics there in the snowy mountains out of a resort called Thredbo. So that's something that I've been doing for 10 years, as I said, and I'm also getting other women in other places inviting me to come in to their location in order to teach their local community of kiters as well. So sometimes I'm lucky enough to get the opportunity to travel to some other places as well.
Wow, what an exciting life you have. So,
Yes,
when I'm
I'd
listening,
be so grateful.
When I'm listening to you, it sounds like you were just born with a lot of energy and a lot of positivity and a lot of excitement, and everything you touched on turned into gold and started working, and everything has been straightforward and very positive in your life. I wonder, have you faced any challenges, any major challenges in your life so far?
Yes. Yes, I have. And in fact, that's probably, I appreciate your compliment, Ali, of being energetic. I love being that energetic, passionate person. But I've gotten this way because I've had so many things go wrong in my life
Mm,
and had to overcome those challenges and turn those negatives into positives. And with practice, I tend to be able to turn those negatives into positives a lot quicker these days than I used to when I was younger. But there was a time in my life, especially after my brother got cancer and he had to have his leg amputated. And that was a very, very difficult time for our family. And I found myself as a young girl and young woman being very depressed
mm,
and having a really hard time in life. Even when I was running the retail store in Australia, that was really my parents' dream that I was following. They were the ones that wanted to start a
mm,
sports store, and they were the ones that were claiming this is the way you earn money. This is the formula for life, and I followed that formula. And although I learned a lot and I got a lot out of it, deep down, I knew that wasn't my dream and my passion. And so there were many, many years of severe depression. And
mm,
I didn't want to feel like that. It was very, very difficult time, and I took every opportunity that I could get to learn how to turn those negatives into positives. I did a lot of therapy. I tried a lot of different things in order to discover my happiness. But it wasn't until I made that decision to make that dream true and go up to Alaska. And I saw how the women, I told you I called them badass women up in Alaska. I
mhm,
saw those women living a different lifestyle that was so different to my own. I was in Australia, I was the one in the sports store talking about the sports and encouraging people to go out and do these sports. Whereas the women up in Alaska, they were living the lifestyle. They were being that person that did the sports, that was
mm,
out there, that was really challenging themselves. And I loved that. And so after that first trip, I evaluated my life, and I was very unhappy when I went back to Australia. I had this huge high in Alaska and then felt the extreme lows. And that was what actually encouraged me to go back to the US and try something new. I decided I sold my business. I sold Adrenaline Sports. I sold my house. I sold my
oh
sports
wow.
car. People thought I was crazy, and I just cashed up and I went back to the US with my mountain bike and my snowboard in a box. And I went and bought a mount. I rode my mountain bike up and down the roads in Seattle to all the RV dealerships, and I bought myself an RV and put all my
Wow.
toys in it. And I drove that RV back up to Alaska. And I drove for 12 months around Alaska, making this bucket list of mine of these things come true. And during that time, I spent a lot of time by myself. And
Mm,
that really gave me the chance to learn to like myself, enjoy my own company, and not be reliant on having other people for entertainment or stimulation. It also gave me the chance to figure out, well, where did I want to go? What did I want to do? What were the activities that I really wanted to do? And I started ticking those all off. And as I did that, I really started to find myself and what I wanted to do. So depression was a huge problem in my 20s, and something that is something that's still, it's like a polar bear. It tends to
mm,
want to come and grab you again sometimes when things go wrong. But I've learned some of those skills, those mindset tools. I have a lot of tools in my backpack now
mm,
to help me overcome that sadness when things, start to head downhill. Yeah, so that was the mental sort of struggle, and I've also had physical struggles. I've had spinal surgery that laid me out for over 12 months. I had to have a spinal fusion, and all of a sudden I couldn't do my sports and I couldn't run my business, and that was a huge thing to overcome, especially when I was wanting to be a champion kite surfer and I had dreams of competing in the world championships. And to turn my negative story into a positive, I did get to compete in the Australian kite surfing championships when I was 48 years old, 2 years after
Wow.
spinal surgery, and I became the women's female kite surfing champion in the
I
waves,
love it.
and was
Congrats.
ranked number 4 in the world soon after that.
Wow.
So, yeah, I was able to get out of that injury slump and get to where I wanted to make those dreams come true. And once you've done that once, you believe that you can do it again, even when things get really bad. And there's been multiple health issues that I've been dealing with even recently that I've had to do the same thing with.
Wow, what an inspiring story. And speaking of inspiration, did you or do you still get your inspiration from people and things, or what is it like? How do you get where do you get your inspirations from?
That's a great question, Ellie. I love that question because it's something that when I was younger, in my teens and my 20s and even early 30s, I would be inspired by these Olympic athletes and these
Mm,
champions, superstars that were out there. But I found that as I age, I'm actually more inspired by the people that are older than me that are still doing the things that I want to do. And a couple of days ago, I was at the beach in Florence, Oregon, and it was my first session kite surfing in 18 months. I had been recovering from, I blew my ACL skiing, so I was recovering from my knee surgery. And in January this year, I was diagnosed with brain aneurysms. And so I had 3 brain surgeries in February this year. And that was one of the scariest times in my life. I didn't know. I was grieving my dreams and grieving my life because I didn't know what my life would look like. And so when I got to the beach a couple of days ago and I'm like, okay, I'm ready to try kite surfing, I had that extreme fear again, like when I stood on the top of that mountain, and I really needed to find the courage to go out there. And luckily, my friend John was there. Now John is in his mid 70s, okay? So he's got a couple of decades on me, and I had remembered that he'd had a stroke about 10 years ago. And he was back out there kite surfing after a stroke. And even though he's hard to even understand when he's talking because he lost some of the use of his face, I asked him the
mm,
question, John, how did you have your stroke? Was that a brain aneurysm? And he said, yes, I had a brain aneurysm. It ruptured and it caused him to have a stroke. And so that was the biggest inspiration that I have ever had, because I'm like, well, he's 75, his brain aneurysm ruptured, he had a stroke, and he's back out there kite surfing in the
wow.
waves and proving to me that it's possible, and proving to me that I can be strong too. And so I'm so inspired by people in their 70s and their 80s who are still skiing, they're still kite
Mm,
surfing, and they're overcoming some of these big health obstacles that we get later in life. That to me is
mm,
just so inspiring.
mm. Wow, that is definitely so inspiring what you've just shared with us. So, have you faced any, other than your own challenges and obstacles and setbacks that we now know just a little bit about, when you're getting to these extreme situations out in the nature that you cannot control the circumstances? Have you got into any, other than the one that you told us with the heli skiing? Have you got into any extreme situations where you felt like, okay, maybe I went a little too far on this one?
Yes. The answer is yes. Sometimes those red flags that I talked about might be flapping in the
Right.
breeze, but sometimes our excitement, they call it the human factor. The human factor
Mm,
in us is just so excited, we decide to ignore those red flags, and we want to do something so badly that we do it anyway. And there has
mm,
been times, in fact, recently I was up in Alaska, and there was an incredible glacier ice cave that I'd seen some people taking some photos and video footage in this cave, and it was just spectacular being in ice that is thousands and thousands of years old, and it's so blue, and to go inside these caves with a super high ceiling. I had to go. I had to go, but
mm,
I was still recovering from my brain surgery, and I needed to find somebody to go with me. And so when my husband finished work for the season in sort of late April, I said, can we go to the ice cave? Please, please, please. Can you take me to this ice cave? I was so excited. And he said yes. And so we skied out to this ice cave. And when I got there, I I got there first, I suppose, because I was so excited. I was like the Energizer Bunny, and I heard a, I heard this
oh,
crack
wow.
in the ice, and I'm like, whoa, whoa, that's definitely
Wow.
what you don't want to hear around a glacier, because the glaciers can collapse,
Mm,
they can carve,
wow.
and that was definitely a huge red flag that
Wow.
I listened to. And when I backed up, I got sort of back away from the entrance and decided to wait for my husband. And he got there, and I said, "Hey, I just heard a really big crack. What do you think it's safe to go in here? What should we do?" And we stood around for 5 minutes or so, and we took our skis off, and we didn't hear any more cracking. So we went, okay, let's go in for a quick look. And so we, we went inside the ice cave, and it was incredible. Exactly what I was
Mm,
hoping for. And we took photographs, and I was just in awe
ah,
of nature and this amazing moment. And we made the decision not to stay in there very long. We're only in there for
mm,
5 minutes or so, and then we came back out. And I came back out first, took a photo of my husband inside the ice cave, and I put my skis on and started backing up into the sun. If
mhm,
I was a little cold in the shadow of the ice, so I wanted to get into the sun. So I moved back. Then my husband came out. The next thing I know, I heard this cracking again, but louder than last time. And I looked
wow.
over at my husband, and I saw him running as fast as he could. And I watched the ice carve down behind him
Wow.
and land on the ground, and snow go flying everywhere. It looked like it was going to create an avalanche or something. And it was
Mm,
like watching a movie, something out of a movie, like an Indiana Jones when he's running out of the
mm,
cave with that big ball chasing him. It was very surreal, and it was very scary. And my husband's running with one ski on. He'd only put one ski on, and he left the other one behind. And when everything settled, we saw what had happened, and the whole front of the cave had collapsed. And huge
wow.
pieces of ice were in the
Wow.
position where I was just standing only a minute earlier. And
Mm,
luckily, my husband's ski got blasted forward, so he was able to get his ski on, and we gave each other
wow.
a loving hug and embrace, and that was a close one. And
Mm,
yeah, I should have listened to those red flags. That was a little silly, but we
wow.
survived to tell the tale of that one.
Wow. So when you experience something like this, and the next time you're doing something, let's say, that usually others would not do, how do you shake something like this off? And when you're off to your next adventure, you're like, yeah, let's go for it. Let's do it. Or how much do you have something like this in the back of your head?
Well, that's another great question, Ellie. And I discussed this situation with some other avalanche professionals and some other people in the area to make them aware of the danger. Once I had seen the
Mm,
danger, it's important to share that knowledge so somebody else doesn't make the same mistake.
mm,
And I had somebody say to me, "So I suppose you'll never be going in ice caves again." And I thought to myself, well, of course I will. I will definitely go inside ice caves again because it brings me so much joy in my life and I love that experience. But it reminded me that my human factor excitement level, and I have to keep myself in check because I'm so
mm,
excitable,
mm,
got a little bit out of hand. And so it's a
mm,
reminder that I should have listened to that red flag and taken that into account and remembered that the other red flags were that it was late in the season. All the other people that had been in it were a month earlier when it was much colder, and so the temperatures were warming up in late April. And then also the time of the day that I chose was late in the afternoon. So it was in the peak of the heat in the sun. So there were definitely 3 red flags there. And I know better than that. I do. If there's 3 red
mm,
flags, we call it quits. And
mm,
it's like my husband teaches me this lesson often because he's an avalanche professional and he's a heli ski guide, and avalanches happen. And so
mm,
does that mean they're never going to go up there and ski a mountain again? No, they're going to
mm,
go the next day and ski that mountain. But when something goes wrong like that, it definitely teaches us a huge lesson. It increases our experience, and making mistakes is okay as long as you survive, right? Because then you learn from those experiences. And next time I'm in an ice cave, I will remember those things. I won't forget that
mm,
again, so that I can make smart decisions next time. and
mm,
and my husband makes smart decisions on the mountain every day. Just because the ice cave collapsed that day doesn't mean it's going to collapse every day. And just because a mountain avalanches one day doesn't mean it's going to avalanche the next day. It all depends
mm,
on the combination of weather and temperature and snowpack and what's happening. And we really just need to sometimes keep ourselves in check. When we do get very, very excited, maybe my excitement needs to be a red flag. Hang on, Jenny, you're
mm,
very excited. Double
mm,
check everything in terms of safety. And I am a
mm,
super safe person. Most of my students go, "Wow, Jenny, you teach kiting like an avalanche class." There's a lot of safety involved in that. But sometimes we can want something so badly that we overlook those dangers or things that we shouldn't do.
mm. I love that. And as I was listening to you again, I was just comparing your journey, the things that you have done in your life, in your extreme sport life, if you want to call it that way, and also comparing it with the entrepreneurial journey. Because there is so much that we can compare and learn from what you just shared. Being, you know, check the temperature, check back with yourself, what am I getting myself into. One more thing that I learned about you is you're a very optimistic person, which I do believe that we entrepreneurs have to be optimistic. A good healthy amount portion of being an optimist, it's required. Otherwise you will never start a business, you will never push through the challenges that you face in your life as an entrepreneur. And yeah, there is so much I do believe entrepreneurs can learn from you and your journey and what you have been through and what you shared with us.
Well, thank you. I hope there's some lessons that can help some people out there. And you are so right. As an entrepreneur or as an athlete, we need to be able to dream of what we want and
Mm,
set those goals. We need to be able to create the vision of what we want and how we're going to get there, and then be
mm,
totally optimistic that everything is just going to work out the way
mm,
we want. But there's going to be some some road humps and some bumps along the way that are going to be challenges, but to embrace that challenge and look at that challenge as something new that will feel so good when we overcome it, right? And so that then we can push through to the next step.
Absolutely. And let me tell you a secret, Jenny. When I'm interviewing people, I'm always on task, right? As an interviewer, as I'm always on task, I'm always, paying attention to what my interviewee is saying, but also getting ready to come up with the right questions based on the answers that you give and keep the story going. And it's sometimes it's challenging because depending on how much I'm also inspired by the story, which I'm oftentimes or most of the time am by the stories that I get to hear, it's a balance between, okay, how far do I go as a person, as a listener, to to pay my focus and attention to the story, and how much do I stay on task as an interviewer. And today, because your story is so amazing and everything that you shared with us, I had a hard time sometimes to stay on task because I was I am so inspired by the stories that you shared with us.
Well, thank you so much, Ali. You had some great questions for me, and I've loved chatting with you. And I hope there's been some inspiring stories and some great lessons for your listeners too.
Thank you, Jenny. It was an amazing pleasure having you on the show. And please, before we wrap up, tell our audience where they can find you. We will obviously link you up in the show notes, but tell them where they can find and connect with you.
Well, you can find me all over the world, but the best place to find me is at my website, adrenagen.com. You can find me on Instagram under Adrenagen and Facebook under Adrenagen. So if you just Google Adrenagen, you are going to find me in multiple locations. You'll find some great videos on YouTube that you can watch. And I'd also love to offer my services. If you've enjoyed listening to my stories today, I would love to come and talk to your team, to motivate your team and inspire them and share my lessons with you as an empowering, inspirational speaker. And I'm also in the middle of writing a children's book. And so in the near future, though, some of my lessons are going to be shared with the next generation of wind warriors to help them learn to overcome their fears and find courage and the simple joy of just flying a kite.
I love that. We will definitely have to get your books for my children. And thanks again, Jenny, for coming on, inspiring our audience, giving them all the amazing stories and sharing it with them. So let's keep doing what you do, and let's keep thinking big. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me, Ali. Bye.
Bye-bye.